Alright, so here we go. We are, you get tired of me saying the same thing all the time. CIS-125. Introduction to Programming Logic, and this was from 11, 12, 14. I think that sounds right. Yeah, I think so. So it would have been Wednesday. And what we did was file access. And we actually did sequential files. Okay? So we're good to go. We have, as an example here, we talk about sequential files. Where you have a file and like each line, there exists this each line for the file, and those lines are usually marked. Those are some type of carriage return for those. So anyway, I got some issue here. Okay, so
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure if I have the wrong number. Is this Mr. Vargas?
nope.
Okay. And are you a homeowner in Moreno Valley, sir?
Nope.
Okay.
Wrong state, even. All right, bye.
Wrong state? What state do you live in?
Iowa.
Iowa? And why do you have a 909 number then?
Oh, wouldn't you like to know? You're calling random numbers, so yeah, it's interesting how I got that, but too bad. We'll talk to you later. All right, that was somebody called my Google number about a home ownership, and so that was just a side note here in our podcast. I'm going to keep going, and so I answered my computer. I answered that call. All right, so we have these carriage returns at the end of each of these. So when we read the files, when you read a file, you read a line, the computer will know that it's done reading when it sees the carriage return. There's different ways of doing this, but this is a simple text sequential file. I've got here an end of file, but if you don't put a flag on it, you can read until it doesn't read anything. And we'll see how that works here in a minute. Okay? So we have data, we store data in a file, we talk about sequential files, and we talked a little bit about direct access. Direct access like a MySQL database in which you could use PHP to read that or other languages, and you can access that through a browser. Which really leads to an important thing in the fact that we want to be able to write software that allows us to manage data, whatever way is the best way to manage it, and typically allow people to access that through a browser because most people can drive a browser. Okay, now we talked a little bit about direct access where we have a particular record in a file and we access that record with some type of a marker so we can go directly to a piece of data. That'd be direct access, which is a topic for another day. We're focusing on sequential files. Way easier to manage at this point. This is page 2 of 4. In most all software you have to open a file. We talk about why to open a file. We talked a little bit about you don't want two people in a file at the same time. Somebody goes in, changes a record, while somebody else saves a file that they had stored and the change then is lost. I'm not going to go through all the details of that, but it's really important. And in some cases, people figure out ways to open multiple files and have them open. But in our case, you understand the fact you can open a file, and when you open it, you can write information to the file. You can rewrite the file new, or you can append a file that's already open, or you can open it to read the information from the file. In Python, read is the default. Okay? So, for example, you could download, you could open a file. You could build an array from the file, just an example, read all the information into an array, make whatever changes you want, and then you could take that array and write it back out. And then close the file and make it available for somebody else. Alright, so in programming, for example, we have a little example here. We can open a file, we can read the first record, and while, in this case, we're looking at the length of that first record, and as long as that length isn't 0, then we're going to process. Read another record, loop it. Okay? So whether there's 10 records or 1,000 records in the file, we can work our way through them pretty efficiently. Okay? If you're only reading a file, if you're only reading it and you're not going to update, you're just going to bring the data in and work on it, you're not going to change it, this sometimes would be pretty efficient. You could open the file, build your array, and then close it. Now, the next person can use the same file. That's a whole other issue. You know, where the file rests and who all has access to it. Another topic down the road. Look at an example. I created from a database a file for us to work on. So it has a couple things. It has a piece, a number, then it lists if somebody's a Democrat or a Republican. This was true data. It's about 10 years old, and we'll talk more about it specifically in class, and the students worked on either a flow chart or pseudocode on how to do that. So here's a better picture of the data. They read it in as a string. You're going to read the whole thing in as a string. Here's the file. And then they did this in class, and I believe all the groups got it done. Something really cool in Python. We did this. You can see I circled it on the board. You can have an if statement. You can say if this string of information in this location, which really worked in this situation really well because you could read in a piece of that information and then run a check on it. Or you can run a check on it here and see if it was a Democrat or a Republican. That's what we did here. Okay? So, in our case over here, we did some initialization, we opened a file, we read a record, and while it wasn't the last record, you could use this, or you'd use the length example I showed earlier. I have a little bit of a legend here. Loop. So I sketched out a little bit of what this might look like. Okay? I guess that's it. So, the last page. Okay. So let's just take a look at a little bit of this. So we've got, I got a document in which I have my code in. Okay? And I just update this a little bit today. So we've got the name of it, file, author, date, what it does, okay, and then I create a legend. No end of file marker. We're going to look for a blank record, okay. Line is reading in a line of code, okay, a line, not code, excuse me, really a line, a record. We're going to read each record, okay. Holds a record from each read. DC is going to count the Democrats. RC is going to count the Republicans. F represents the file during processing. Okay, and I'll show you where that is in a minute, and then I explain what the flag is. Next thing, in green here, we did some initialization. Okay, I'm going to use an array for errors. I'm going to count the errors. And this is a key thing. We're going to count how many Democrats and how many Republicans. Then I added some notes here. Not a lot, but a few notes explaining the lines. Open the file. And line reads the first record from the file. Okay? We open the file for, since there's nothing in there, it's opened to read. Okay, which means we're going to read information from it. On Next week, Monday, we'll write to a file. While I check the length. As long as the length isn't 0, so true, we're going to perform what's down inside here. Okay? So take a look at this. I'm going to scroll it up a little bit. Okay, we'll see if we can keep most of that legend showing. Do you got that? You might want to double check it. We got the line. D count, Democrats, R count, Republican count, F. And my legend is a little short. I needed to add a couple things to the legend. Okay, I will do that later on. So I really needed to add these 2 things to the legend. This is my error list, and these are going to be, I'm going to count how many errors. Okay. So here is all of the code. So let's go through that. I'll use brown here to go through it. So open the file. Got the first record. It's not 0. Then we do our if then else here. Okay. If Democrat in line, now this is a variable, so it's going to look for this string in there. If it's true, then it'll count. Else if, and it's going to look for the Republican. If that's true, it's going to count. Else, if it's neither one of those, we're going to build an array. Okay, we're going to build an array that has the errors in it, so we can go back and edit our file. It's really kind of a smart thing to do. And so we're going to count how many errors there are, so we know if we got 1, 2, or 1,000. Okay. This, you wouldn't, in the program, since we're just looking for the counts, you wouldn't have to do this. But I did it just so I could see everything print out. So this is more of a test feature in the code, so I can see it. Okay. So for our loop, okay, remember we read here, we enter the loop. Got our colon there. We read here again, okay? And then this line down here eventually closes the file, okay? So we stay in the loop until we read a blank record. This becomes false, and then we leave down here. We print our results. How many Democrats, how many Republicans, how many bad records. We print out the array, and then we're done. I did not print out a run for the program yet, but I'll add that to it, and I'll also edit my legend up there, get that cleaned up, and then I can make the code available to the students if they want it. And that's it.